I've included a couple in here later on by one of my friends I went to school with. He teaches in Chicago now. Joe Francavilla is his name. He's a really creative guy. For example, he had a student who, I don't know the exact history if they lost the use of their right hand, but they can only play with their left hand, and it's certain pieces they really loved. So you'll see in here, he made a transcription of Für Elise for left hand only. And I've seen, the reason actually I wrote him is I see him post things on Facebook. That, you know, this student came in last week and they really loved this piece, and, you know, it doesn't exist on piano, so I made this arrangement or this transcription for her. And I think as teachers, that's something really valuable and beautiful you can give your students if you're interested in this, like something unique that you've done for them. That's kind of an unforgettable thing for a student to receive, you know, like have this thing that it's not playable, but my teacher made this for me. And similarly, there's another one in there that you probably, there's the Turkish March of Beethoven. And for all these, I tried to include kind of the original score so you can compare things. So Joe made this nice little arrangement for one hand. So I guess the student must have made some serious progressions, because they started with that one and then did the Für Elise, which you see is not a super easy piece of play for the left hand alone. Right. And I didn't include some of his other ones. He has a kind of America the Beautiful for like 2 pianos, 10 hands. That was a bit of a big score. And he's also done Happy Birthday for left hand alone, which makes this one look like child's play. So, and then the opposite extreme of that, right below, Joe's transcription for his student is a Liszt transcription. Which is, you know, just the beginning, and you can imagine this is just child's play for him, and that's going to accelerate quickly into difficult things. So, as a teacher, you doing it has value, and then just coaching your students to gently work through this. Elena and I were talking a little bit that I like to play bluegrass. I'm often a bass player or a cellist, but learning to play by a little bit by ear, just getting into that kind of vibe of, you know, even those kind of simple musics, to do them well takes just as much artistry as playing something in the classical canon. It may not be complicated on the same level, but the way one voices things and chooses notes, it's the same real processes of music making that I think deserve respect. So you also may have students who play music in church, and hymn adaptations for organ or for piano, that's another great skill that is centuries old and kind of connects them with this tradition of music making and helps them to do things, you know, that they're good at. One thing I love about early music, when Mozart would go, when he was commissioned to write an opera, it's a very different process. And you probably know this, but just to review it, like, so he got asked to write an opera, and he wouldn't sit down and start brainstorming and like, oh, I've got these great ideas. Usually he'd go to the town where it was going to be and meet the singers. And he'd find out what they were good at. And then he would write the aria for them. It's called tailoring the aria. So, you know, she's good at this, let's make her sound good. Handel did this too. He had a, forget the name, he had a famous singer who was very good at Ds. And you'll find in her aria lots of long Ds. It was like, he wanted to make her sound good, and it's very funny now, we do the opposite. We have these things, and now we squish the students or the musicians into these arias that were intended like for one person to really show their strengths. So, you know, that's again something you can do with your students. You know, I would be even so bold sometimes, maybe not all music, but you know, there's a certain passage that just like doesn't work for them. I would rewrite it, you know? Maybe I wouldn't do that for an audition at Juilliard or something. But there's certain examples, like, do you want to just struggle for 20 hours? Do you want to make this passage work for you? I think there's certain kinds of music that would allow that and even encourage that. So, then the last thing, I've kind of just been talking about this, but I see it again as a tool of kind of empowerment to the student. The ability to choose and to make music, and not just always to be deliberative. To understand that process is really important. So, I talked a lot about already my experience with transcriptions and how it was really important to me. I felt like it was those years, even maybe barely 10 years ago, that I felt like that's when I really got to know the harpsichord. And instead of thinking about, again, this, I need to do what's there exactly, like when you have to make the choice of, why did Bach choose C sharp and not A? Kind of a little light bulb went off. And I feel like that's when I got to know my instrument the most. So from personal experience, it's been fantastic for me. So maybe now we can kind of walk through the packet a little bit and just talk about these examples. So I played for you already the Vivaldi, and maybe it'd be nice to play a little bit of this Sarabande for you too. But before we do that, let's look at the score on the right, which is the Hortus Musicus, like musical blossoms. It's a collection, a partita, a little collection of dances. And Johann Adam Reinken is the composer. A tiny fun story about him. He was maybe 60, 70 years older than Bach. And you know probably the famous trip Bach made to North Germany to study with Buxtehude. He was young and he got in a lot of trouble for skipping out of work. He was supposed to be gone like 3 weeks and he was gone 3 months.
Yeah.
And at that time he went to visit Hamburg, which had one of the most amazing organs in all of Europe. And Reinken was the organist there. He had, I think, already by that time retired. He was blind, he was very old. And Bach was testing the organ, as he often did. That was one of his jobs, and just trying it out and improvising. And I guess, again, the story's related through Forkel, but Bach had been improvising for an hour or something, and then finished and walked out, and Reinken was in the back listening. He didn't know, probably. And so Reinken says to Bach something like this is like the true art of musicianship. I thought it was dead, but I see that it lives in you. So that would be a very wonderful thing to hear somebody say. So this example, studying this transcription, what does this teach you? How to ornament, right? If you have people playing sarabands or slow pieces with a lot of half notes and whole notes, you can see what Bach did to these. So let me just play a little bit here. And I should say, too, like Reinken wasn't some kind of chump guy. He would have known his violinists would have wanted to add a little bit to this. Often these composers make things a little extra simple, knowing their musicians would ornament. In fact, it's one of the complaints about Bach, that he wrote things too fancy, so that the performers didn't get to choose. So, but nevertheless, you can see what Bach did. So it starts off real simple, right? Something like that, right? This is probably the brightest piano I've ever played. So Bach has, so that leap, he goes the opposite direction. So when you perform yourself or study something, you can just take a peek at this and like, yeah, you're allowed to do things. And here are some of the things that Bach chose. And he transcribed actually 2 of these trios, so there's a lot of things to look through. And then maybe just for a little fun here, I'll play at least some of this Sarabande. So you can just see above what the cello was. I had to make some choices. When do I add some notes here? I don't want to make it too cheesy. So it's kind of a fun project. years or so. So Bach becomes the victim of the transcription. And Busoni's transcriptions are some of my favorite. This is one that is not complicated, and it's actually interesting. I think Busoni's a guy I really love. His edition of the Well-Tempered Clavier, he made one, and even at the beginning of that, he says, so this is Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, and I've transcribed it for the pianoforte. And I kind of love that he really actually didn't change very much, but he just said, like, hey, Bach wrote this for a very different instrument. When I'm going to play it on piano, I'm just going to claim I'm changing it, you know. Not that, like, one hears, you know, harpsichord players are going to be a little sensitive. From a little, you know, people make fun of us because we don't have the pedal or dynamics. But never, and you know, and people will say things like, you know, Bach had the sound of the piano in mind when he wrote his music. I'm pretty sure that's not true. I mean, I think Bach would have loved the piano, but he wouldn't have written the same music at all. He wouldn't have written that kind of texture that's really hard in the tenor and bass. It gets too thick. You know, when one plays fugues on piano, it takes a lot of work to voice them, and on organ or harpsichord with that kind of even voicing and clarity, it's much easier to actually hear the polyphony with somebody, you know, not having to do all those things. So what I love is Bach or Busoni saying, hey, I'm just going to make it work here. And so like the other thing here, just quickly that I realized thinking about this, like with an orchestra transcription, or in this case an organ transcription, one of the things we tell our students often is like that imagination of sound, right? What does it mean to sound like a singer, a soprano or a tenor, or an oboe? You know, this is a practical way to have that imagination in our mind of like, hey, take this, you know, quartet with oboe and flute and string, two strings or whatever, and play it, you know. That's a real concrete way to have that image of sound in your mind rather than just kind of abstractly imagine that. So if you get a chance to listen to this as an organ piece, you know, it starts off with these kind of gentle flutes usually, and organ registration, like Busoni does, often they have pipes of different octaves, right? So even though Bach writes in the bass, it probably has the 16-foot, so. And I didn't realize this was going to have tenor clefs, so forgive me if I don't read this perfect. So this is, again, kind of a nice, easy flute sound. So, you know, that solo thing is going to be really interesting, right? It's probably going to have a lot of mutations, the really high harmonics of a mixture, maybe it's a reed, right? But it's going to be a very different sound. This. And so it's actually going to have notes an octave higher, maybe 2 octaves higher, maybe 2 1/5, maybe 3 1/3. It's going to have this very kind of complicated, rich sound. And so to play that piano piece after having heard the organ, and it's interesting, I should have just played the piano version. I would have had to read the clefs, but it's the same. And so he says, here's the tune, canto, very expressive, and with Anschlag. Who speaks German? I forget Anschlag. It's something good, I'm sure. So, and this is something I'm not used to doing anymore, is voicing stuff, so forgive. And so forth. You don't need to hear me try to play piano. But it's again a neat thing just to see these two things and have that sound in your mind. So 2 more transcriptions I have here of Bach on the next page. And this is kind of to show you where 2 different people might go with transcriptions. So this is from one of the secular cantatas. This is the famous Sheep May Safely Graze. So flauto dolce Anybody know what a flauto dolce is? The sweet flute? Recorder. So usually there's either block flute or flauto dolce, some kind of recorder. So very kind of gentle sound. And there's two of them. And then continuo doesn't tell us what that probably is. The options for continuo on a piece like this would include maybe lute, maybe viola da gamba, but not bassoon probably. You don't know, but so maybe a more gentle thing. And that continuo line down there just has the B flat, right? But you probably know, like, if the harpsichord or the lute is playing, they're adding chords, right? So it looks very bare, but it's probably something, you know, something with some gentle chords that the player would improvise. So the flute's in third. So forth. So then I copied for you too, Egon Petri, and you see what he does with the left hand. And then below is the wonderful Italian pianist Dino Lupati, and he does something different. Now that publisher says, like, we don't know if he really would have played this. And that's one of the things you can never know for sure, but it's at least interesting that he keeps it, he makes octave leaps, keeps a little bare. So the first one is